Hi guys, how you going? Welcome to the channel, or if you're new, welcome. In today's video, I'm going to try and basically educate you in relation to the power needs of the STARLINK Mini. Now, by the end of this video, you'll get a really good understanding of what the power needs are. And I'm not talking about simply just reading the specifications on the back and that. You need to unpack it and go into a little bit of the detail in relation to the power it needs, the wattage, the minimum voltages, the maximum voltages, the minimum current it requires. So, and I'm going to try and simplify it as much as possible so you can get a good grasp and understanding. If you're plugging in this to 240 volts or 230 in Europe or 110 in America, 120, you're never going to have any concerns or worries in relation to power. But when you start plugging in basically, when you start plugging this 15-meter cable into battery packs and other size battery pack voltage converters, that's where you're going to start to run into some trouble if you don't know what you're doing. And you're going to be, what the hell's going on? It's supposed to work on 12 volts and 5 amps. I've plugged it into a 12 volt source and it's still not working. And I'll talk to you also about the mystery blue light. A lot of people haven't noticed that on the STARLINK panel, there's this mystery blue light and what it does. So I'll educate you on that. But I've broken it all down. I've done a whole heap of research. I'll take you through it all. And then by the end of it, you should be hopefully more the wiser. You can share your knowledge and pass it on to the next person. Because I've got now my full mobile office set up, and I'm running 3 screens in my mobile office. I've got my laptop, I've got a second screen for that, I've got wireless keyboards, I've got my iPad Pro. My goal is to be able to work remotely for the day job and then also have my mobile YouTube studio. And then, when my son comes along camping with me, he's got his mobile, gaming studio or whatever. They're sort of my ultimate goals, and hopefully some of those might tick your boxes. Hopefully you might even educate me. You may pick up some opportunities for me to learn from. So, and I can improve my setup. And if you go to my channel, it's quite a diverse channel, but a lot of it revolves around my 4-wheel drive, the outdoors, camping, hiking, cooking, 4-wheel drive trips, touring trips, all that sort of gear, and a lot of DIY stuff. I like to try and save $1 or $2 doing all of the stuff myself and just thinking through things and finding multiple uses. So that's the plan, and I'll give you some insight into all that today. All right, let's get started with it. Now, first of all, what we're going to talk about is the operating voltage of the STARLINK Mini. So it has an operating voltage range of between 12 and 48 volts. Now, the absolute minimum is 12 volts at 5 amps, which is 60 watts. So now I'm going to teach you some basic electrical maths, and it's simply that voltage times current equals power, which is watts. So 12 times 5 equals 60 watts. So that's the absolute minimum you need for the STARLINK unit to operate without any issues. Now, you'll also hear about this mystical 100 watt requirement. Now, the 100 watt requirement comes into play when we're talking about using a lower voltage supply. So the 100 watt comes into play later on, and we'll go into a little bit more detail there. So at this stage, all you need to know is you can plug in anything from 12 to 24 to 36 to 48 volts into this unit and it will operate. Now, as an example, for instance, if you've got 12 volts at 5 amps, you get your 60 watts, like I explained. Now, the average power consumption is actually somewhere between probably 25 and 40 watts. So, but on startup, it can kick up a little higher, and hence why the 60 watt requirement. Now, if you're using the power brick that comes with it, so I've got the Australian one here. So this obviously plugs into 240 volt. If you're in the UK or Europe, you'll have the 230 volt one. If you're in the States, 110, 120 volt one. Either way, this has a step down transformer in it, and it will reduce the voltage from that higher voltage down to what the unit requires. And I believe that this steps it down to about probably somewhere between probably 20 and 30 volts, which is then more than ample. Now, this, if you're using this, you will generally have no problems at all in relation to using it with the 15-meter power cable that comes with it. Now, this is the other big variable. So what happens is, over a longer distance, you experience what's called voltage drop. And if you've got this, if you notice this cable is actually super thin. So this in itself can present a problem when you start plugging this into your 12-volt system, you know, in your RV or in your four-wheel drive or caravan. So, and we'll get into that sort of detail. But if you're running this 15-meter cable, with this, you'll have no issues whatsoever. And just remember, as a rule of thumb, the longer the cable, the bigger the voltage drop. And I always will come back to is that you need to have 12 volts at 5 amps, 60 watts at, and again, I'll clarify this end here is plugged into here. If you've got 12 volts at this end coming out of this, right, 5 amps, right, by the time it gets to the end of this cable, and it's under load, it ain't going to be 12 volts, right? So this is why this sits at a lot higher, at that sort of 20 to 30 volt range, because by the time it gets to the end of this, the voltage has dropped X, but in this case, you've got no issues. Now, one of the other things I just wanted to cover off, just to explain in relation to the voltage drop, right, is the simple thing is, the thicker the cable that the voltage is going through means less resistant, therefore more current can flow. If it's a thin cable, that means there's more resistance. And if there's more resistance, then less current can flow. Therefore, other things to be mindful of. The shorter the cable means less resistance. So therefore, more current. The longer the cable, more resistance, less current. So that's why there's so many variables when it comes into play when we're talking about plugging this thing into, say, a 12-volt power supply. And this is where we need to get into a little bit more detail in relation to, you know, buck converters, voltage boosters, voltage regulators. And again, I don't want to scare you, but there's just a few basic things you need to know, because it's one thing about, you know, just plugging it in, there's the power side of it, but then the cable plays a big play, and they're the two biggest variables. So I'll give you a bit of a better understanding in relation to those. So we've established that if you're using this, you've got no concerns whatsoever. You'll plug this into your 240, in Australia, your 240 volt power inverter, and then this will step down to the voltage to the required one. Now, be mindful, right? If you're going to be using this in an inverter in your RV or your caravan or your four-wheel drive, it's probably not the most efficient way to do it, because you're taking 12 volts, pumping it up to 240, and then from 240 bringing it back down to, you know, 20 or 30 volts. So in that instance, you're best to actually bypass this if you've got the right setup, and actually basically start with your 12 volt setup. So I'm going to talk a lot and focus on 12 volts, because that tends to tick a lot of boxes for most people. All right. Now, if you're then looking at basically, if you're looking at basically utilizing a 12 volt power supply, now there's many ways, different paths we can go down. Now, first of all, you're going to require a new cable, which has got a barrel jack at one end and then a USB-C port at the other end. So you can get these in various different lengths. This one here happens to be 3 meters. Also, and I'll pop it up on the screen, you can still utilize the existing cable that came with, which has the 2 barrel jacks, and then you can get some little adapters which will convert from barrel jack to USB-C, or you can even go online, buy a whole new 15-meter cable, which I think is a bit of a waste, or you can go to the STARLINK website, and I believe there's one on there as well. If so, I'll pop it up on the screen. Okay. Now, what's important is that you get a USB PD, barrel jack to USB-C cable. And the main reason, and you'll hear about this PD quite a lot, is that what happens is, so with this particular cable, it basically needs to be able to output 100 watts. It needs to be able to carry 20 volts worth of voltage at 5 amps. So you can't just use your run-of-the-mill standard USB-C cable. It's just not going to work. You need to make sure it meets those specifications. PD, USB-C, 100 watt, 20 volts at 5 amps. It has to tick all those boxes. If it does that, perfect. And the reason for this is where the 100 watts comes into play. The reason for this is that it will start at one end at 100 watts, right, at that 20 volts. But then under load, by the time it gets to the other end where it's plugged into the STARLINK Mini, you're going to experience voltage drop. And that voltage drop, by the time it gets to the end of it, you're hoping that basically it meets the requirements of the STARLINK Mini, which is then the 12 volts at 5 amps at 60 watts. And like I said before, the cable is only one component of it, all right? So don't get any cheap ass cables, make sure it meets the right requirements. I'll pop on the screen the ones I'm utilizing and they'll be in the description. I always put basically Amazon affiliate links on my videos. With those affiliate links, I can qualify for a small commission. All right, so now there's another variable I want you to take in play also, especially when you're talking about with these Starlinks. You're obviously positioning them out in the open, again, on top of your vehicle, on the tripod, you know, on the bonnet of your car or the top of your RV. Now, with these panels, they're in full sun basically. Now, what is also in full sun is the cable. And one of the things also that can cause voltage drop, other than the thickness of the cable, the length of the cable, obviously the quality of the cable, is heat. So in higher heat environments, that will cause you to experience voltage drop as well. So this is why it's very important to get all of these tick, tick, ticks happening to make sure that you've got a carefree experience. All right. So now what a lot of you guys are doing, right, is you're thinking, okay, I've got my Starlink now, it operates on 12 volts, and you go and buy your cable. So you think you've got the right cable, beautiful, it's, you know, it's a 100 watt cable, it's, you know, it's a PD USB-C cable, and it can carry up to 20 volts at 5 amps. Then you go buy your little cigarette lighter and plug it into your cigarette lighter. You plug your cable in and bum boom. It's not working. It's not getting the right amount of supply. And you're thinking, well, I've bought the right cable, you know, I've plugged it into me 12 volts, you know, what's going on? So these things, basically, these cigarette lighter ports are not all built equal. So this is the one I utilize. So a lot of the electronic stuff I buy, whether it's docks, you know, USB cables, splitters, cigarette lighter, USB ports, I tend to buy a lot of the Ugrain stuff. And again, I'm not sponsored by them or whatever. I've just found that with the Ugrain stuff, the quality seems to be really good. I've been using a lot of their stuff for years and I've had no issues whatsoever. And again, I'll pop a link on the screen and down below. Now, with this one that I've purchased here, what's special about this? Now, this has 3 ports on it. It has 2 USB-C ports and it has a USB port. This is also rated to 130 watts, so it ticks that box, all right? It is also has a PD USB port, and one of them in particular, which outputs 100 watts. It also has boost buck converters in it, which boost your voltage. And this is the important bit. And this is where a lot of people get caught out, is they buy these, they don't read the fine print on them. And basically what this does that's special is it turns your 12 volts and boosts it to 20 volts at 5 amps, which gives you your 100 watts. Again, 20 times 5 equals 100 watts. And then the beauty of it is you then tick the box in relation to the specification requirement from STARLINK for the Mini, and then that means you can plug in this 15-metre cable. And by the time the power gets to the other end of it, under load, and the load being the STARLINK being in operation, it will still be delivering the minimum 12 volts at 5 amps and the 60 watts. Keeping in mind that the STARLINK Mini generally on averages run somewhere between 25 and 40, but this is, again, make sure that you're not going to have any dropouts or any issues. And then don't forget you've got the heat to take into consideration. And don't forget, heat will cause voltage drop across the cable from one end to the other. And that's why it's important that these tick that specification. That's going to be probably the most common thing that people use. The other things that basically, for instance, I'll be testing in future videos, and I'll give you the full run through. We've got here a step up voltage converter. So I've bought this one actually for my King's oven. So that King's oven runs on 12 volts. This one in particular will boost the voltage up to apparently 15 volts. I'll actually trial it with the STARLINK to see if the 15 volts is enough. What I'll end up doing is I'll end up buying one which will give me the step up to 20 volts. And again, I'll just save this one for me King's oven. All right, so I'll experiment with that. I've just ordered and it's on the way. I'm going to be experimenting with my Ryobi power tool battery. Again, you can use your Milwaukee's, whatever brand power tool you've got, but this has got 18 volts in there. And what I've since found out is that I'm able to get basically 5 amps at 18 volts out of this, and this will then be perfect to power STARLINK. So win-win. And then the next thing on the list is I've got this Jumpstart pack. And with this Jumpstart pack, with this, which is absolutely perfect, this outputs 12 volts. And just so happens, the barrel jack pumps straight into it. So this outputs 12 volts at 5 amps, absolutely perfect. So we'll see how this goes, because this one would be ideal for me for taking hiking. So the plan is basically, because I want to find a solution so I can take it hiking. This ticks a box for me. This definitely ticks a box for me for hiking, because I've got multiples of these, and often I've got power tools I take when I go forward driving, electric ratchets and stuff like that, battery operated ones, so I'm always carrying these in the car, or my battery operated chainsaw. So yeah, in future videos I'll explore a lot of this stuff, and we'll do some testing, and I'll let you know how it goes. Alright guys, so just remember too, like there are cables out there, and again with the Australian market, obviously Anderson plugs are very big, so a lot of the 12 volt systems have Anderson plugs in them. But be very, very careful, because you'll buy an Anderson plug, which is then connected to, you know, a USB-C port plug, or this Anderson plug might be then connected to a barrel plug at the other end. But just remember, the cable is only one piece in the puzzle. So at the end of the day, if you plug this into 12 volts, right, after the voltage drop across the cable, when it gets to the other end, it's still going to have 12 volts at 5 amps and 60 watts. But if you were to plug this into a 20 volt source or a 30 volt source, different story. It's allowing for voltage drop to get to the other end for the STARLINK unit. I'm no expert, but this is all the research, extensive research that I've done, and then sort of this is what I've discovered through my research. I'm now going to conduct a whole heap of trials in relation to all of these things, but you know, it comes down to sort of, you know, basic maths and physics and so forth, and all the things I've explained to you today, you need to keep all these things into consideration. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you're a little bit better informed. I'm a novice at this sort of stuff, but if I've got anything wrong, please educate me, drop it in the comments below and let me know. if you've got any tips or ideas in relation to your setups, things I might not have covered in this, pop them in the comments, because obviously other people read the comments, they may get something out of it, and there will be lots of future videos in relation to this subject in particular. Alright guys, oh, and the mystery blue light. I forgot to tell you about the mystery blue light. Alright guys, so on the back of the panel, right, when you plug your power into your STARLINK Mini, you'll see this blue light flash up. If there is sufficient power to your STARLINK, it will light up blue. If you plug something into it and there's not sufficient power, it will not light up. It's that simple. So you've got obviously a multiple different options in relation to what you can plug into the STARLINK. Again, it may be a bit of trial and error for you guys, but it just as simply as if the blue light doesn't come on, it ain't gonna fire up. And you'll find if you've got a power supply that is either intermittent or, you know, over a period of time in the heat, it drops down below the minimum requirement, that light will go off. But again, game changer, the STARLINK Mini. Absolute game changer. So, alrighty, time to head inside. It's getting a bit chilly here. Give us a thumbs up, share it around to as many people as you can. And again, subscribe to the channel, set the notification bell, and I shall see you in the next video. Alright guys, cheers. Starship. Can't wait for the next launch. See you guys. Bye.